All right, we have just a short bit of notes today. We're going to talk about circles in a different context. Now we're going to look at them in the xy plane. So the circle has an equation, and it comes from the definition of a circle. Basically, a circle is the collection of points that are like the same distance from the center, right? And that little line I'm drawing, that's the radius. That's the distance from the center. And this is actually, in disguise, a Pythagorean theorem question where every one of these radii can be a hypotenuse. You can see this is the little right triangle. This is a right triangle, super small, but and that's how this comes to be. We use Pythagorean theorem to say, hey, the radius is always the distance between the point, which is xy, and the center, which is hk. And r, of course, is the radius. And I won't go through exactly how that's shown, but it is a consequence of the Pythagorean theorem inside of a circle. So one thing to notice, though, is on this side of the equation is not r, it's r squared. Okay, so every problem here today, we're going to write down the equation, and then we're going to manipulate it in a way that answers the question. So first thing says write the equation. And we have 4 questions here. So you got to know the equation. I won't give this to you. I don't think it's too bad to kind of have a visual note for it, but the center you need to know is hk, and the radius is r. So when I go to plug these things in, I'm putting in for h, I'm putting in for k. K is negative, so I'll put a -2 there, and the radius is 7. And honestly, you can stop there. That's good to me. If you want to simplify, which just read the directions, you normally don't have to simplify, but you surely can, and that would make this. So again, we see on the right side, it's not 7, it's 7 squared. Okay, so h and k is the center. All right, and then here's a picture. So that last question we answered wasn't too bad, and that's because we knew the center and the radius, so we need to do that here. So the center is 0, 0, and in this case, the radius looks to be 2 blocks. So when I have my formula, which I promised you we'll write every time, I'm going to plug in my hk, which is 0, 0, and my radius is 2. So I'm going to put a 0 where there's an h and a k, and I'm going to put a 2. And again, that's good. You can stop, but if you want, you can fully, subtract the middles and then square, and then that's our simplified answer. So when it's just x squared, y squared, that means the center is at 0, which is actually normally the case. Okay, so again, let's be careful about these negative signs. So h and k and r. So h will go here, and it does change the sign. So anytime there's negative, it'll flip it to positive. And the radius here is actually a square root. But lucky for us, the square and the square root cancel each other. Like that. Just like how a plus and a minus cancel each other. And that would be our answer. Okay? But again, if you want to stop here, that's fine by me. It matters what the answer choices are. It matters about the directions. But I just asked for an equation, so any of that's fine. And again, find the center, which will be 0, 3, not 3, 0. And the radius looks to be, again, 2. So get our equation in there and just plug in. So this one is 0, and this one looks to be 3 and 2. So anything we can't simplify, we will, and that's our answer. So again, the radius isn't 4. It's r squared is 4. Okay, so now for the more involved problem is, hey, let's pretend like they don't give us the radius and we have to do some work to find it. Fortunately, we can still just rely on the same formula, because when they say point, they're talking about a point on the circle. So they're talking about a point like that. And any point on a curve or on a function is an xy point. The center, though, is different. It's hk. So we have, if you count the number of variables, we got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We know 4 of them. So we can find out what the radius is. And once we have the radius, things are a lot easier for us. Okay? So I'm just going to carefully plug in. Well, actually, first I'm going to plug just the center in. And you'll see why in a second. Because this is basically our equation, right? This is pretty much the answer. We just need to know what r squared is. So to do that, you're going to plug in x and y. So we continue down, and we get down to just a single number on the left. So that's r squared. So the answer to our question would be to take that highlighted part, just copy paste it down here, and replace r squared with 10. This is the answer. That's the equation. And then we have to graph it, though. And to graph, we need to know a decimal for the radius, so we can, because we're counting blocks, so a decimal would be helpful. Turns out that r is approximately, so we take a square root. Okay, and plotting a circle is kind of fun. You go to the center, which is down here, and the radius is 3 and some change. So we're going to go up 1, 2, 3, put a line a little bit past there, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, and 1, 2, 3. This is plotting the 4 easiest radii so we can connect the dots and make a circle. Now, I don't want to see this, that's not right. It's actually a lot flatter than you think on the edges. So you can, if you're drawing it, draw a sketch. You can extend the edges a little bit more than you think, and then just slowly try to connect those dots. And see, and that makes it a little bit more believable. So if you're concerned about your picture, make sure you're just like putting some points at the north, south, east, west poles, so I know that you're taking the radius into account. Okay, so let's do that again. So y x minus h y minus k r squared. Plug in the center first if you want. You don't have to, but by having this plugged in, I know that this is basically my answer. I just need to find out what r is. So we plug in 1s. We simplify. Remember to do the inside first, parentheses first, and we get 5. So the answer is, take this, copy it, paste it down here, and we know r squared. It is 5. The radius is not 5. R squared is 5. And if we do want to find the radius, we have to square root both sides. And we take the positive part. There is no negative radius. Like negative square root 5 is actually part of the solution, but we don't do negatives in geometry, pretty much, when we're in the plane. So I believe this is at about 2.2. So the center, you could definitely plot the center at the very beginning too. I mean, the center's not going to move, it's always the center. But now we know the radius. So I'm going to go 1, 2, 1, 2, some change, 1, 2, some change, 2, some change. Just make sure I put the center at the right spot for the other one. Yeah, okay. And then just flatten it out a little bit. This one's the radius is smaller, which means it's a little easier to draw. The curvature, though, is tighter. The curvature is greater, and that's a little easier for our hand to, approximate. Anyways, cool. The last questions are pretty basic. So we have the equation. So as promised, we're writing down the equation for every problem. And this time, you're given the equation, so you want to work backwards and try and find out, hey, what was the center and what was the radius that was chosen to make this equation? Like, I had to sit down and make this equation. I chose a center and a radius. For the radius part, again, it's not 16. R squared is 16, which if you take the square root of both sides, the square root of 16 is 4. And the center is HK. So we have to look here first and say, what does H need to be so that it looks like -3? And the answer to that is 3. It's not -3. 3 needs to be H so that it looks the same. And we have the same thing going on here. K needs to be 1. So plot our center, and the radius is even this time. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. And just connecting them a bit. There you go. Okay? So it's nice and easy when the radius is a whole number. Okay? And same deal here. R squared is 9. Matching those up. So what squared is 9? 3. And the center. What do you think H is? H happens to actually be 0. Because x minus 0 is x. So that's how it would match up. And again, K needs to be 3. So that the signs agree in our formula and in the given example. Okay, so go up to 3, and then we have a radius of 3. So 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, and just draw a good circle there. Okay, there you have it. That's all I want us to really know about circles. It revolves heavily around the equation. Again, you got to know the equation. I'm not going to hand that to you. All right, so find a way to kind of remember it. It's not too long, and everything is squared, so